Hey everyone, welcome back. We are so glad that you're here. My name is Justin Simmons and I'm the high school coordinator at the Cedar Falls campus here at Prairie Lakes. And now you may notice we are filming in a little bit of a different location than we normally do. We're actually in an elementary school cafeteria and it brings back some good memories, right? Some of you have good memories, sad memories, funny memories, but most of us get brought back to a certain place or time when we step into a school cafeteria, except for all of our homeschool friends out there. We still love you guys, but you may not get the nostalgia that we do. When I step into a room like this, the first memory that came into my mind was when I met my first best friend named Austin in the first grade. Technically, we didn't meet at school, but we met at a mutual friend's house the week before school started. You remember when your mom or dad would take you to their friend's house so you can just play with their kids? There would often be other kids that they would just be there and you'd start playing with Legos, Nerf guns, or craft projects. But I met Austin at that friend's house, and then the first day of school, all the first graders met in the school and we gathered in this cafeteria to meet our teachers and our classmates. And wouldn't you know it, there was a guy in that class named Austin. And I remember him coming over to me and saying, "Hey, I remember you. You want to be friends?" And guess what? We stayed best friends for the next 10 years. Isn't it crazy how easy it is to make friends when you're in elementary school? And you could find something in common with almost everyone, and maybe you just liked their lunchbox, and so you suddenly became best friends. And some of you know what I'm talking about, but it's easy to forget these moments as you get older because friendships look so different. Some of you may have a real hard time finding good friends, or maybe you just ended up in your circle of friends due to classes, at school, or sports teams, or band practice. And some of you may have no idea how you ended up in your friend group. And then once you found your friends, these friendships actually looked incredibly different than elementary school days. It's no longer just asking your parents if your buddy can come over to your house. And for some of you, those friendships have caused some real hurt and pain in your life, when your friends seemingly stabbed you in the back with rumors or actions that actually put you down. Friendships can be the toughest part of our lives growing up, but they can also be a place where we find a ton of joy as we continue through this journey of life. Some of us call ourselves Christians, but feel like we're running with this crowd that has no respect or consideration for our faith in Jesus. So, what do we do? We know that friendships and relationships are a part of this life. So what do we do with this area? If you're like me, you've asked this question numerous times throughout your life, and this next 2 weeks, we're going to unpack why we should find good friends and how we can be good friends to other people. And this week, we are going to make the claim that every Christian should find good friends to surround themselves with. And now I'll pause for a moment, since some of you may not call yourself Christians or followers of Jesus. And I still think these truths will apply to you here, and I hope you can see how this Jesus really does change and impact our whole world. We talk about these things because we know that God has called us for a mission to spread the truth of Jesus, and friendships make up a big portion of this. He changes our whole life. All right, so Justin, why should I find good friends? Why are they so important for my life? Well, first, you find good friends because they shape you. Now, this is a truth we understand at the basic level. I've heard people say that they can normally tell who you are as a person simply by looking at your top 5 friends. And these people know that friends have such an impact on how we act, what we do, and what we say. So now we know this can be good or bad. So let's take a look at the Bible real quick in the book of Proverbs. Now we're going to be referring back to this book in the Bible because it's filled with a bunch of classic one-liners that are just packed full of wisdom. And many people read this book every single day so they can just sit and absorb all the wisdom it has to offer. And maybe you'll do the same thing after reading a few of these verses together. So the first verse I want to look at is Proverbs 13:20. It says this: "Walk with the wise and become wise, for a companion of fools suffers harm." Man, that's almost like a mic drop moment, right? Maybe you were reminded of a few friendships when you read the verses together. And you can say, yep, I know that's true. You guys, this isn't new stuff. This is in one of the oldest books that we read today. The writer of Proverbs knew that your friends would shape who you are. That means if you walked with the wise, friends that made good choices, you'd start to become wise. But once you start walking with fools, harm, hurt, and pain are just right around the corner. And let's look at another one real quick here in Proverbs 22, verses 24 and 25. Do not make friends with a hot-tempered person. Do not associate with one easily angered, or you may learn their ways and get yourself ensnared. Same thing, right? Your friends will influence who you are, so choose them wisely. If you want to become an angry, hot-tempered person, befriend that kind of person, and it's only a matter of time before you take on those traits. Now, at this point, I'll pause for a moment because we may be feeling a slight tension. Maybe feeling, okay, Justin, does that mean I'm not supposed to be friends with people who make bad choices? Isn't there something in the Bible that says Jesus was a friend of sinners? What about that, huh? Well, great question. First, Jesus was called a friend of sinners. He hung out with the outcasts, the tax collectors, and sinners on earth, and was judged pretty harshly from the religious leaders in the world. Well, the first thing is this. Jesus is perfect and never sinned in his entire life. I mean, you may remember a time when he was brought to a desert for 40 days with no food or water and resisted that temptation from the literal devil. Jesus wasn't going to be brought down the wrong path in his life, no matter what was at stake. And I don't think any one of us can make the claim that we have the same strength as Jesus here in this situation. So then second, Jesus also had a core group of disciples who he later calls his friends during his ministry. He walked with these people, these 12 guys, through everything, and they had the same passion of following Jesus and living a life honorable to God. So, yes, Jesus was a friend of sinners, but Jesus also knew that our friends would have an incredible influence on us, which is why he gathered his 12 disciples to work together. And we can definitely still look to Jesus as our example when it comes to friendships. So I think we can all agree that our friends shape us. So why else should I find good friends? The second reason, because friends help shape communities. Now, for this reason, I want to look towards one of the first Christian communities on record. Let's take a look at Acts chapter 4, verses 32 through 35, and see what this first community looked like. And you could find the book of Acts in your New Testament after the 4 Gospels, and the story picks up at the very first stages of the local church forming and beginning to grow. So we'll start again in verse 32. It says this: All the believers were one in heart and mind. No one claimed that any of their possessions was their own, but they shared everything they had. With great power, the apostles continued to testify to the resurrection of the Lord Jesus. And God's grace was so powerful at work in them that there were no needy persons among them. For from time to time, those who owned land or houses sold them, brought the money from the sales, and put it at the apostles' feet, and it was distributed to anyone who had need. You see this unity that arises in this community? Here we see a group of people aligned on their mission and vision, sharing everything and working hard to meet the needs of the people around them. Sounds like a pretty awesome group of friends, right? Here's the truth. The people we surround ourselves with, our friendships begin to pour out and impact the community we find ourselves in, and everyone is better for it. So let's think about this. You're in a group right now, either at your house group or at your church, and you're surrounded by people. Some of you may be sitting really close to your best friend, and feel free to give them a little elbow, give them a nudge, let them know that you really care about them. So how can your friendships impact the group of people you find yourselves with right now? Maybe you're not friends with everyone in this room, but you making an effort to include others, to be kind and growing in your friendships can make a huge difference. I guarantee that if you started taking these actions, you'll find yourselves with an incredibly selfless community full of good friends. Because what's the opposite of that? A group that's pretty cliquey, right? A group that doesn't include people, that instead of fostering relationships, they actually destroy them. And if that's the case, let's be honest tonight. Later in our small groups, determine how we can change that. Good friendships help transform communities because they have more than just 1 or 2 people in mind. They seek the needs of others, and everyone is much better for it. Just imagine how cool that would be if your community became like that. Now, finally, why else should we find good friends? And I believe that we should have good friends because they help advance the gospel. The advancement of the gospel is our mission here on earth, to make sure everyone hears about Jesus, who loves them, dies for them, and calls them to follow him. And like we said earlier, Jesus had close friends. Let's look at John 15:15, when Jesus says this to his disciples. I no longer call you servants, because a servant does not know his master's business. Instead, I have called you friends. For everything that I have learned from my Father, I have made known to you. Jesus looks at his disciples and knows that there are going to be hard times ahead. Lots of suffering and struggles that will keep coming upon each one of them as they work to spread the gospel. But Jesus takes the time to call them friends. Friends who get to work together to spread this message of Jesus. Now, when you look at your friends now, do you see them following Jesus? If you want to be a kingdom worker, a follower of Jesus, you've got to surround yourselves with others who have that same calling as you. Again, this doesn't mean you neglect every non-Christian in your life, but who are your greatest influences? If you walk with the wise, you will become wise. Remember yourself in these moments where your mission is and who is leading you towards that. So, as we wrap up today, some of you may be energized and encouraged because you have good friends, and that's great. I'm in the same boat in this season of my life. I love my friends, and we are all pushing each other towards Jesus often. But some of you may find yourself lost and even lonely. Well, hey, I've been there too. It's not fun, and it can be very discouraging. But I do have good news for you. You are surrounded by people who are here today. We're about to go into our small group, and maybe, just maybe, that friend or friend group is waiting there. Can we just all be honest going forward tonight? And because my prayer, my hope is that we can all be strengthened and encouraged that friends help shape ourselves, our communities, and help advance the gospel here on earth. And maybe your small group can be that place for you. As we go into small groups, I just hope you guys all have a great night, and we'll see you next week.